they get to be teenagers and older, and their problems become emotional ones, as you alluded to.
Especially with the girls.
And it's emotionally taxing instead of physically taxing, because now you're, instead of just managing one adult relationship with your wife, you're managing 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. So it's a different dynamic. And that's the thing that struck me about it.
When my girls, I have 2 girls, they're 15 months apart. So now they're 41 and 40, and my son is 37. And when they were a teenager, I was having kind of an argument with the oldest girl who was she was 13, and she was an emotional wreck. And I'm trying to reason with her and talk to her. And I lost the argument with her last statement that said, "Dad, you were never a 13-year-old girl." That was the end. I couldn't argue anymore.
Yeah, what do you say to that?
Each stage is so different as you watch them grow. But like Steve said, you all of a sudden you have 5 adults in the house instead of just 2.
See, that's the moment you turn to your wife, Wayne.
Yeah.
That's why God has given them 2 parents.
Yeah.
Lamb side and lion side.
I can't win this argument. It's on you. Here you go.
God is a double-edged sword.
Yep.
Yeah.
Both sides equally sharp.
Yeah.
And boys can be just as bad. I mean, I can still remember having arguments with my dad, and that turning point that Wayne just was talking about. I can remember when I was like 18 or 19, my dad said to me one time, "Well, I wouldn't do that." And I looked at him and I said, "Well, of course you wouldn't do that. You're 55 years old. I'm only 19.
Yeah.
I think my sarcasm seems a bit cyclical. But go ahead, Brian.
When my daughter turned 13, I was having a lot of problems with her, and I was talking to my medical doctor I don't know why I was talking, and he had 5 daughters, older.
Oh.
And he goes, when each one turned 13, it was like a switch. And his loving little girl became someone he did not know. And after about a year, the switch went back off and back to normal. And he goes, each of his girls did the same thing, except for the last one. The last one probably saw how bad it was for the 4 older sisters and decided she wasn't going to do it. But I think it's more of a hormonal thing with them. And when that happens, you got to love them. But I remember my daughter not knowing what's going on when she was yelling or upset or just giving me one-word answers. Sure, whatever, I don't care. But yeah, just maintain a relationship and just love them through that.
Yeah. Yeah, Lee, if you can still hear us, if you're there, I wonder what your experience has been like.
Yeah.
For the sake of having teenagers,
So, I mean, I've got, God bless me with 2 boys and 2 girls also. And I think Steve nailed it when he said that, there's obviously differences between boys and girls, but the age differences too. So like, I think I've been blessed by the fact that Shelby, her wheelhouse are the young ones. She's always loved that the younger. I mean, she's always gravitated towards the younger age kids, and I've been more. I've gravitated more towards the teen years, and that's kind of been my wheelhouse. So as a family, and I know Anthony, you and I have talked a little bit about this in our times in small groups together, but it's just relying on each other, on our spouses to kind of navigate those different times in their lives. It's gonna be, you take this one, honey, because I can't get my head around it. Or, but yeah, I mean, it's definitely important to I mean, for me also, regardless of the age, some kids, some people, and we've been blessed with a few kids, just making sure, as far as when we talk about consistency, just as much, you're always going to spend family time together, but as they get older, I think trying to spend as much one-on-one time with each of them individually as they become a person, and trying to figure out who they are and what things mean, and just being able to spend more one-on-one time as they get older, I think is super important.
No, that's really good. And if I could kind of ask a question in tangent to that, did any of the dads on the call feel that, how am I going to word this right? Almost to the effect of being too intentional, if there is such a thing, in terms of carving out that one-on-one time? Did you ever feel like maybe the right thing to do in a particular moment was to not delve into, I don't know, I guess I'm trying to figure out is can you ever push too much for establishing a balance with your kids, given all the fluctuations that they have, and the development that is eventual? Do you ever find yourself, maybe even now, thinking, you know what, I'm just going to give them some time to themselves, to their thoughts, and then circle back later? Do you always try to insert yourself into it just so that you can make sure that your presence is there? I'm sorry, that's probably a pretty layered question, but if anyone wants to take a stab at that, Vasant, Lee, Steve, anybody?
Yeah, I mean, I think as parents or as dads, we exude a certain amount of control, and I think that's important, to establish boundaries, and especially when they're younger. But as they get older in their teen years, you do have to pump the brakes a little bit, in different ways. Certainly with they have a certain amount of more freedom as they get older, right? They learn, they start to drive, they start to hang out.
Sure.
We always, we'll always err on the side of strictness, and I know my kids would agree when I say that. But we have control. We have a certain amount of control of who they're hanging out with, where they go, what they do, where they're spending their time. One of the topics was training kids to relate well to others. Well, we have a lot to say about, and whether it's investing more time supporting them in their children's ministry, youth ministry, serving with them, doing all those things intentionally to make sure that they are doing the right things and thinking the right way. Yeah, I mean, I think as far as exerting control, I think you have to do that. Obviously, when they get adults, they're going to have to make their own choices and things. But I think, the more we do that, the better example we set.
Thanks.
I think reasonable boundaries are really good. So in other words, when you're talking about being involved and making sure that you're doing everything with them and so forth and controlling them, it's got to be reasonable. Yeah. And what you say is you don't say that you have to be in by 10 o'clock every night. No, you say, well, for right now you have to be in by 10 o'clock every night. Let's try that for a month and see how well you do. Yeah. And if you're responsible, then maybe we can increase that to 10:30, or we can move that. In other words, this is just a starting point. But once they establish their ability to handle the responsibilities, they can have more. But along with the responsibilities of staying out later, I would also include, some kind of a chore, reading, making sure they, some kind of academic goal. In other words, if you want to stay out to 10:30, you better be making. If you have C's in your classes, no. If you want more freedom from me, you have to do better in school, and you have to show that you're responsible enough to do really well in school, or whatever goal you set for them.
No, that's a really good point. Thank you.
I I don't think in parenting there's a one size fits all. I think every child will have their own personality. They will all be different, and I think it's part of a parent's job, a father's job, to understand his children. There's a verse in scripture that says, train up, a child in the way he should go. And part of that is, not necessarily just directing them toward the Lord, but the way they should go is understanding their bents and talents and desires and personalities. And we had two kids that were very much like my wife. They wore their emotions on their sleeve. The beautiful thing about that is you always know what they're thinking because they let you know, good or bad. And we had two kids that were more like me, that were, more quiet and reserved and, kind of the stubborn ones. And that's actually a little more dangerous because you don't know what they're thinking.
Don't know what they're gut.
So they might need a little more, interaction and quiet time, where you just listen and wait for them to get to the point where they tell you what's on their mind.
Okay. All good points. No, very good. I think as you guys are sharing, there seems to be a consensus on the eventuality of that shift that happens. And I was just wondering if, as dads, you guys all you guys are all wonderful fathers who I think fostered relationships with your kids that are envious of young dads like myself. But I was curious to know if, I'm sure you guys had counsel from other dads, older dads, when you guys were growing up. Did you ever have that reality, but also did you try to hedge that shift, or was it more of well, it's coming, and we'll deal with it when it gets there? I know that for at least my wife and I, we try to teach them now how we're going to teach them as they grow up. So we try to, build into them those principles of communication. But I was just curious on how you guys handled or hedged the shift, or if you just let it come and then you just deal with it.
We had an interesting situation. We were in an adult Sunday school class, and a couple of the families were just a little bit older than us, and children were a little bit older than ours. And we learned basically from their successes and failures, what they did. So we'd ask them questions like, oh yeah, we did this with our daughter, we did this with our son. And it's that was a great, mentor, mentee relationship we had with just another couple in the church. We'd go out to lunch on Sundays a lot, and we'd come up and we'd talk. And that was one of our biggest resources and helps. The other was a church, another couple in the church was several years older than all of us, and they were the teachers of our class, and they constantly fed us experiences they had with their children. They're a fantastic couple. They had, but they're just people, and they learned different things and made mistakes, and they shared it with us. So that was where we probably got the most information, other than James Dobson and some other really good resources. Those are some of the best experiences. One other place would be other parents that were in the same situation. They have good experiences that they'd share.
My kids started attending small groups even as early as middle school, and they kept, even through college, they would contact, and even when they're in town, when they come back from college, they still talk to some of those kids in their small group that they had, sometimes 15 years ago. I mean, my oldest son's going to be 32 this year, and they're twins too, so they're both going to be 32. But they still talk to some of their kids from some of their friends from small groups that they had in a church that has changed pastors twice since then. But they're still friends with them. And I can remember, you talk about different stresses and problems with kids. I remember both of my sons had a real hard time in high school. One of the guys in their small group, his girlfriend broke up with him, and he was just all shaken up, and he actually attempted suicide. And both my sons learned a lot from that. And everybody in that small group learned, you know, that's just that was the wrong decision. And that, I mean, God never wastes a hurt. I mean, that boy did not die, but he was injured. And I tell you, that affected everybody in the church, and all the teenagers, boys and girls, about talking about things, and about not taking things so seriously, and about realizing what your goals are.
Yeah. No, those are great points. I mean, you touched on a good point, because I apologize if I'm hogging the forum here with all the questions.
It's okay.
You know, it makes me think about, you know, we all have our own baggage that we brought in our own upbringings and our own difficulties as kids growing up. I mean, we know how brutal the playground can be, physically and emotionally. Do you guys, not that you have to get into too many details, but I was just curious if you had any strategies or techniques for dealing with things when our kids encounter like bullies at school. You know, and my kids are young, but I know, I mean, she's on the playground. I know she's going to feel even just a small piece of that from, you know, her friends don't want to play with her that day. So I'm just curious to know if you guys have any, how you guys handled it, if you ever did handle it. So.
I think the best thing to do is just talk. Yeah. Talk to them about what's going on, and communicate with your kids, and keep the consistency of going to church. I can't tell you the idea of just the fact that they know every Sunday that they know what they're doing on Sunday morning. They're going to get in the car and ride dad and mom to church, or go to church. And on the way there, you talk about what you did for the week. And on the way home, you talk about what you're going to do the next week. And set up meetings, and just set up communication time. Find out what their feelings are.
Yeah, so I would like to share my experience with my daughter recently regarding that bullying and other things. So when she started going to junior high school, she felt that like she's lonely and alone. No one was ready to talk to her. So every day, just once she returned from school, so she used to complain, Dad, so I don't have good friends, so no one is ready to talk to me, and no one is ready to play with me. So just I observed a couple of days, and just weeks and months passed just like that. So then just myself and my wife, just we suggested her that, hey, just why don't you take like a step from your side and go and talk to them and invite them to play with you, okay? So, and one or other day, so just they will realize that, and they will try to play with you. That is one thing. So if your kid is a little bit talented, or if she or he can showcase their skills, or if they have any talents, suppose if they are good in studies and all, just they can showcase their talent, so that other kids also will get attracted. So that is one other way. So just they can become like a role model among their peer group itself. So that is one best way. So so these are all some ideas that we have suggested to my daughter. So after 1 or 2 months, so she did the same thing. So just she followed the same way, just whatever we suggested. So after that, people started, all other kids started recognizing her skill set, and so automatically, so she made so some good friends, and now she is very happy.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's great, Basanta. That's cool.
Good to handle.
Nice.
Yeah.
Good point.
Thank you for sharing that.
One of the this is definitely a question we got a couple hits on from our registration, and it's pretty general. We've already been talking some about this, but we'd be remiss to not bring up the question about how in general do you just point your kids to Christ? Craig, you mentioned making a habit of church attendance. This is just a rhythm, a pattern in our family that we do, not because it's a ritual, but because we want to connect with the Lord as a family at church. So that's a great baseline. What else would you guys say would be ways to help continue point your kids towards Christ, maybe throughout those different seasons of life?
Definitely Sunday school and church is the main factor, besides, of course, praying at home and teaching them at home. But once you get them going, once they become 18, 19, 20, they're on their own. And you got to hold to the scripture that says, train them up in the way they should go and they will not depart from it. Middle daughter pretty much departed quickly. Actually, by the time she was 13, she was departing and giving us quite a lot of issues. And but being in, and sometimes parents, when the kids are going astray a little bit, are a little embarrassed because, you know, your kids are going to Sunday school and you're in life group, and you don't want to bring it up that, you know, my kid is just going nuts and they're doing this. And we struggled with our daughter for quite a while until finally one night in life group, they broke us up into men and women, and it was just a prayer night. And I shared what was going on with the men, and my wife shared what was going on with the women. And then our group started praying for us. And I'm not kidding you, within a month, she turned around. She had an awakening. I don't know. The Lord grabbed her. I don't know. Because he kept me from grabbing her. But, you know, so it's that open communication with life group, with friends, and just, you know, pray for each other's kids. It's just, it's a lifeline. You need to have it.
I can't emphasize how important it is to show love to your wife.
Oh, absolutely.
Your kids see that. And also whenever you're out with other people, when your wife isn't even there, to talk well of your wife, not to put her down.
Yeah,
you know, your kids will see that in your life.
Yeah.
I think the greatest compliment you can get as a father is to have your kids say, I understand a little bit more about God the Father because of the model of sacrificial love that we saw in the house. And, you know, I mean, I think one of the most difficult things about being a parent is the thing that you want most for your children, you can't give them. You can put a roof over their head, you can put food on the table, you can give them activities, but a relationship with the Lord, that is something that is a divine interaction between them and the Spirit of God. And so, you know, you do your best, you point them, you model, you know, like know as much about God and his character and the fruit of the Spirit as you can, and do the best you can to model sacrificial love. Have this attitude that was also in Christ Jesus. Although he existed in the form of God, he did not regard equality with God a thing to be grasped, but he emptied himself. And as Bob said, you know, love your wife. And because that's the example of Christ, obviously. And Colossians tells us he is the image of the immutable God. And just like he said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So do, you know, follow my example. So the Apostle Paul told us, as I'm following Christ, follow my example. And you just get on your knees, you pray, and set the best example that you know how to, and love sacrificially.
Nice.
Thanks for the great points.
Yeah.
But there are no guarantees. No guarantees.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, look at the example in Scripture. The sons of Eli were worthless men. He's the high priest, and Hophni and Phineas, or whatever their names were worthless men. So.
Yeah, this brings up a good point too. One of our other questions that was brought up in our registration questions was that what are some tips or creative ways to maintain a relationship with your adult children after they move out of your home? And we've kind of talked about how you, like Proverbs mentions, you try to train your child in the right direction so that they will love God later on. And some, Proverbs again are good general statements, but they're not promises. And Wayne, I really appreciate your honesty too in sharing about your daughter. Like, you guys did try to raise her up in the Lord, and she still had kind of that season where she was walking away from the Lord still. It was cool that it ended in a happy ending, like, so to speak, with her kind of coming back to God. But what does it look like to invest in your kids when they are older, when they're starting to make their own decisions as teenagers, or maybe even after they're out of the house, they're legal adults? What does fathering look like, in those scenarios?
For us, it's important that we have family dinners. We try to do it monthly. And now we have 6 grandkids with baseball, soccer, and everything else that comes along. So monthly, maybe bi-monthly now, but we still try to get together as a family. And we've even had a few family Zoom nights. But now we seem to be out and about a little more, at least going to each other's houses and stuff. And I cherish the one-on-one dinners when one of the kids invites my wife and I over for dinner, and it's just us and them with their kids. And, I cherish that too, but at least trying to get the family together as often as we can, and keeping the lines of communication open always.
Yeah, I hear rhythms again in that.
Yeah,
it's kind of like the church attendance, the idea that, it's this next month, we've got a family dinner coming up. That's good. Yeah, I wonder, Steve, if you would have some thoughts on that too, having grown children.
Yeah, I would agree with Wayne. Not everybody can do it, but what seems to work well for me is when Dad pays. Understand that the kids, they're in the high maintenance phase of life. They're busy, so if you can come alongside and be a support, you're not the center of attention any longer. They have their own families. It's kind of like I joke about this, but what John said, he must increase and I must decrease, and your kids. So if you can, whether it's hosting, a family dinner, or, arranging something, I try to plan family events where, we'll take everybody out, the adults out to the theater, and, maybe have the kids and have dinner, and then some things, where the kids can participate as well. We're blessed. We happen to have a pool, and during this shutdown, it's been getting an awful lot of use. Earlier than usual. So anyway.
Nice.
But just understand that they're the ones that are in the middle of the chaos at that moment. We all think we're busy. But there are times, man, I remember back, I took my turn in the kiddie grinder. So I know what it's like, and you do get your life back. So that's the beautiful thing about it. And, it's some really, really rich times, and everybody will tell you it goes by quickly, but it sure does. So cherish every moment that you can. And
that's cool. Yeah, thank you guys.
I have 3 daughters that are in 3 different states.
Yeah.
So getting together isn't really an option that often. But we have been doing Zoom game nights once in a while, which has been a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
But we take as many trips as we can to go visit the ones that are out of state. And we're going to Arizona next month in July 4th. So, you know, that's love right there.
Yeah.
I have to agree with Bob. Celebrate the times that you do get with the kids.
Yeah.
I have one of my sons is in Thailand, the other one's in Utah, and my daughter's up in Central California. And just this last Christmas, the one that was in Utah, him and his wife came and had Christmas with us. And my wife and I were talking about it as we were making the plans when they came, and we said, well, you know, why don't we just everybody do Disneyland on Christmas Day? And that'll be their gift. We'll just take everybody to Disneyland for the day. And it was the best thing. We got there early. There weren't that many people there. The kids had a great time. And everybody, my older kids hadn't been there in a long time. And my youngest daughter did really well too. So
Nice.
Celebrate the times when you get them. And I agree with Bob. Go and see them as often as you can.
Nice. Yeah, there was a question asked too that talks about, do you ever experience guilt for not spending enough one-on-one time with the Lord because you feel like you're tired from being a dad, you're playing with your kids, you feel like you have to work, you know, and then you just want to maximize your time with your kids. So how have you guys in all the different stages of your kids balanced making sure you're spending good time with the Lord in addition to investing in your family and putting food on the table and such?
Brent, you're not on.
He's
20 years ago, I got involved with a Bible study, which was very structured. Let's say that, right, Wayne?
Yes.
Yeah.
Our structure.
So every week I would have to have something done, and it was set up for you could do spending a daily time with God, but every week was also an application, or every day was an application. How are you going to apply what God's word is? So it's more than just the study of and learning about the Bible, but the big part of it was applying what the Bible said. But that gave me a structure to grow with the Lord, to know Him. It has completely changed my life. It's changed how I think of the world, how I think of me, my family, my wife. But it's changed my heart too, which is the biggest part, to be more like God. So I would say getting involved, having something that forces you to spending time, either if it's daily or weekly, in some type of study, would what helped me. I'd recommend something like that.
Yeah. Think anyone else want to kind of talk about that too? Thanks, Brent.
Just to add, sometimes I had to have a lesson done on Thursday night. Sometimes it was Friday morning. I didn't go to bed until it was done. I had to be up at 4 a.m. So it was something that I found that it was really beneficial for me and my family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Anyone else on how to balance your time with the Lord personally and investing in your relationship with God, balanced with your family and your kids? And
if you look at that time with the Lord to be equally as important or more important than the time you spend with your kids, because that's going to build that time as better, more quality time. So yeah, you may have to get up at 5 a.m. and spend 5 to 6 with the Lord before the kids get up or before you have to go to work. But it's an investment in your kids. So.
Cool. That's neat. Your time spent with God personally, one-on-one, is an investment in your children.
Yeah.
Indirectly and directly.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, thinking about our family relationships, another question was asked about like our relationship with our spouse. Bob, I know you mentioned that about speaking highly of our wives, setting an example in the home. we did get a question here that is, what about lapses in in your relationship with your wife? How do you bounce back from, the stress that kids create, the maybe even parenting differences between you and your wife? How do you navigate those kind of dynamics with your wife when there are kids also demanding your attention?
Date night is really, really important, more so when you have kids. Kudos to Rich for being on date night tonight.
I was just going to say, yeah.
It's
good example.
So important to go out on dates with your wife, get grandma to stay with the. I was very fortunate. I could call my mom on a Thursday and say, tomorrow, Deb and I want to go to Santa Barbara. We need a couple of days. And her and my dad would just move into my house, take care of my kids, and I could go away. But lifting your wife up on that pedestal and treating her like she is the queen of the house, and taking her out. And if you're fortunate enough to have once a month date night, awesome. If you can have once a week date night, more awesome. But it's so important to have that one-on-one time, because that relationship with you and your wife has to stay strong to combat the kids. And so you need that time together to build allies with each other, and to strengthen each other and lift each other up, and talk about how you're raising the kids and what you're doing. So.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. But getting on the same page is difficult when you're both spouses are working and long hours, and it's Saturday and you've got all these things you need to do, and it become, if you don't invest in that time, it can become troublesome in your marriage. And we've been with Tuesday nights is our night. We've made that our night. The kids go to youth group, and we go, grab dinner or go do something, and it's been such a blessing for us to invest that time with each other to make sure that we're addressing family concerns and personal concerns, things that are going on with our day. Sometimes we just don't even want to talk about it when we get home. And now that we're permanently home, it's a great, like you said, it's a great investment, not in your marriage, but in your family as well.
I love it. Oh, go ahead, Brent.
Real quick, my wife and I started grocery shopping together many years ago, and found out it was just a time that we walk around stores and talk. And it wasn't programmed. It wasn't like we're sitting at a restaurant trying to think of what to say. Things just kind of spill out when you're not thinking about it. And by the end of the evening, or by the time we get home, putting groceries away, we kind of all caught up. And I was doing a lot of travel a few years ago, and we went grocery shopping together, and my wife got grumpy because she didn't have this time together with me. So I found it was very important. I call it date night. We spent a lot of money on date night, all our groceries for the week. No, but it was actually a very positive way to spend time together and get something done.
Nice. That's really creative too, especially if you're traveling, Brent, in a way to maximize the time that you're home. That's cool. So date night doesn't even have to require restaurant reservations and a candle in between you. It can look different.
Yeah.
That's cool. Lee, I love what you shared too about Tuesday nights, that the church has provided a youth group program that you guys can use to get away and have time with each other. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, the kids get fed and we get fed.
The other thing I found, my wife and I have bumped into a lot of other couples that are doing the same thing we are, including Mike and Christy McKay.
Nice.
Bumped into them at Costco.
You don't always have to go out to eat either.
No.
I mean, I can remember when my wife and I, we were watching our pennies because our kids were spending a lot of our money, and we had a night out. We would just go and park in Seal Beach, and I loved to go fishing, and it would just, we'd walk them up and down Main Street and then walk to the end of the pier and just stroll and have an ice cream or whatever we had there, or grab a soda if we wanted to, or not even anything, but just walking and talking about stuff and being out in the fresh air and getting out of the house, kind of putting everything else aside and just walking and talking about. I grew up in Long Beach, and the different times we've been to Seal Beach. Seal Beach is a nice little town. Walking out, looking at the surfers, looking at the sunset. It's just an easy way to get out and kind of clear your head.
That's cool. Even for families on a budget, we can still get away.
Walking in El Dorado Park.
Yep.
Walks on the beach.
Nice.
Walk around the block.
Yep.
Yep. Any time without children is probably worthwhile.
Yeah.
We can ask Rich how his date night went too, with the first time in 3 months.
It is really critical to get just alone, away from the kids periodically, because even if you try to get alone or have some time, if the kids are in the house, one or the other is going to get distracted, and it's probably your wife because she has the more maternal instinct, and then you're gonna feel like, hey, I thought this was our time. So I think it's important that you have that time alone together.
Yeah, like this is really good, you guys. Like there's a lot of good input. I've got just 1 or 2 more questions I'd love to run by us. I want to be sensitive to everyone's time. We could close up at 8, but we could go a little longer too. I know a lot of us are fairly free if we go a little bit late, but one of the questions we got submitted earlier was how, when you've got kids bouncing off the walls and things going on potentially with your wife that you're trying to figure out, and gosh, we're all contained in our homes mostly these days, and so everything's all pressured up together. How do you vent, or how do you control your frustration, your anger, the emotions that boil up with you when your kid has just spilled his milk, onto your lap for like the 3rd time in a row? Like, definitely not sharing a personal example right there, but I am sharing a personal example right there. How do you, avoid just exploding and like, yelling at your family? How do you control those kind of like moments?
Self-control. I mean, it's always, people talk about counting to 10. We had a rule in the house: never discipline in anger, and never discipline in the moment. If something happens, we would send, the kid to the room, let them think about it for 10 minutes. You calm down for 10 minutes, because your initial reaction is usually wrong, and usually an overreaction. So I just think, you've got to give yourself space, and you've got to give other people space, because reflection will bring perspective.
One other thing you can do too is don't be afraid to use the bench. In other words, the reserve bench, your relatives.
Yeah.
I can remember when my kids were mouthy as they could ever be and rebellious as they could be. We were over at my mom and my aunt's house one time, and my oldest son, who's very, very confident, just kind of came off on me and was just saying, well, you're just stupid, Dad. And I didn't blow it. I didn't just say anything. My aunt just reached over and smacked him on the side of the cheek and said, you don't talk like that to your dad. I went, holy moly. And he looked at me and he said, Dad, she hit me. And I said, yeah, she used to hit me too. Did you learn anything? I mean, it was just a wake-up call. I mean, it didn't leave a mark or anything, but it just startled him. And sometimes input from other people sometimes helps your kids as well.
Yeah. Yeah, that kind of, it takes a village mentality, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, maybe
I've learned how to apologize a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can't control it, and sometimes my kids have seen me make plenty mistakes, and as a dad, you have to recognize it and know how to apologize and use it as a teaching moment, you know. Wait from it, just say, hey, I screwed up there. And, you know, I think that it's important to have your kids see your failures the same way as your successes, you know.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's huge, Lee. What does it look like to apologize to your kid? Someone who's, you know, under your authority. Like, how do you do that well, I guess?
I mean, you do it in all humility, you know.
It's humbling.
Yeah, I'm gonna say as humbling as you can be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just, you know, it's just honesty. It's, you know, sometimes we have honest reactions, and sometimes those reactions, like you guys were saying before, they don't always come out the way you want them to. It's so not always your first instinct isn't always your best one, as you said. But yeah, I mean, just always teaching, always a teaching moment.
So sometimes even too much pampering also, it may yield to this kind of behavior. So either from dad or mom, so it is better to control too much pampering. And sometimes just we can just tell them, hey, I'm going to punish you by not bringing the gift that I promised you. Okay. So like that, just we can, so emotionally, just we can warn them like next time I'm going to punish you, something like that. So it is better to not to pamper too much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Some, in a lot of ways, discipline can be just revoking like a good thing versus, you know, implementing some terrible punishment. Yeah, this is all good, you guys. Thank you so much for sharing. I know we're getting close to 8. I'm just gonna look at our questions again once more to make sure if we've covered everything. I think the one thing that we have left that 2 different people asked about was, how do we overcome our own dad examples from those who fathered us? Not all of us had great dads. Some of us had awesome dads. Some of us had terrible dads. A lot of us had dads that were in between. And like you guys were sharing, I think it's incredible to hear that some of you have had really meaningful experiences apologizing to your kids and just being really honest about when you've messed up. I think that, to me, that sounds like a pretty rare experience for a lot of kids growing up. What would it look like for us to kind of either leave behind or overcome maybe some bad dad models that we've experienced personally or seen, and kind of move forward with more healthy parenting models instead?
Well, for me, it was pretty simple. I mean, my parents split when I was 5. My dad was a philanderer, and you know, divorce. I was too young to really understand that much of it while it was going on. You know, it was more a sense of confusion and a sense of being lost. But you know, seeing that chaos and trauma from the inside, it just gave me a greater resolve not to do that to my kids. And you know, the interesting thing about it is when you're young and you're growing up without a father, you feel like, oh gee, all the other kids, their dads at the little league field are doing this, and you got to get out of that feeling of oh woe is me, you know, because when I became a parent and started having just these rich and wonderful times with my own kids, I realized, hey man, that was his loss. Think of all of the things that he missed out on because he decided not to involve himself and experience these times as a family. And there's a lot of things you can set your mind to, but I really do believe, you know, I mean, we all grow up believing, you know, you can do anything you put your mind to. You make a commitment as a father to make that a priority, make a commitment as a husband to make that a priority, because you'll hear people talk all the time, you know, at the end of the day, what really matters. And, you know, who are your 8 people? because we all network, we get involved. But at the end of the day, when you're taking your last breath, there's room around that bed for about 8 people. So figure out who those are going to be and invest in them. You know, because relationships really is the only thing that you take with you. So.
No, for me.
But I think you can break the cycle. I really do.
Awesome.
For me, I always had my dad, and I thought my dad was a great dad, but he wasn't a Christian. And as an adult, I learned that there's things that my dad taught me or I learned from him. Some things are great, and other things are basically sin, but they're subtle, they're small. If you can get away with something, it's okay. If you could do this, it's not so bad. If somebody makes a mistake, it's in your favor, hey, it's a windfall. As I've gone through my Bible study, I learned that those things aren't things that you should just accept. Those things you should not be involved with. You need to make things right. So I had to identify what these were that I learned from my dad that are really deep down in me. And then once I can identify them, then I can fix them. But until I knew that there was something wrong, I was kind of lost. It wasn't until I had other men or learning from other men or being shown by God that these things are wrong. Then I could correct them. So
yeah, great point, Brent. So again, your Bible study and those relationships that helped point out some things that you didn't even know you needed to overcome, right? But then you could. Yeah. Yeah. Any other thoughts, you guys?
Let me throw my dad became a Christian right before he passed away. 20 years of prayer. That was a positive aspect. That was also a good thing. So
that's really cool. That's awesome. That's also encouraging, Steve, to hear from your story too, that you were able to overcome that, and here you are as a grandparent with some great kids, and that's cool to hear from your personal story too. Yeah. I'd have to admit, like, my dad was a Christian. I grew up with all my extended family going to the same church, super like stable or whatever. But I had to learn later that everyone in my family, even though most everyone was all a Christian and attended church every Sunday, still had plenty of flaws. And I grew up in that soup. So like you were saying, Brent, I didn't recognize a lot of it until I went off to college and realized when huge problems arise, we don't just stuff them and ignore them until they explode. Like, that's not what is healthy, and just other things like that. And it took other relationships with other older men in my life, professors, pastors, mentors. They really helped show me new ways to think about my relationship with God and healthy relationships and stuff. So, man, I've learned so much from other older men who have had like mentoring relationships in my life. And that's just been a huge plus for me. So I would throw that in the hat too, that's a great way to overcome either destructive cycles or things that have been inhibitors in your life. Just to have those outside perspectives from godly men. And sometimes it just takes like kind of looking around the room and thinking, I really love what that guy's doing with his family. I really love how that guy's serving in the church, or that guy is always so friendly. I just need to go to that guy and say, hey, can we get coffee? Like, a lot of godly older men are walking around the church and they just don't know what a resource they could be. And they don't know what young men want that resource. And sometimes it just takes a young man walking up to an older one and saying, let's hang out and chat about dad life or something. So
how do you do it? This is my question I usually ask. How do you guys make it work, man? How do you do it? It's tough, man. I'll be honest, man. I got to appreciate my dad more as I became a dad myself. But I think for me, I mean, I'm still a long ways away from the awesome road you guys have traveled and what you've laid down for your kids. But I had to stop thinking I had to undo what he did. And like Steve said, you were saying, like it's a cycle that can be broken. And I didn't grow up in a Christian home. I was actually raised Catholic, but we were, kind of every other major holiday kind of thing. So, but I went to Catholic school growing up, and so becoming Christian, it was definitely not only a change in faith, but almost like you were going against what your family tradition was. So there was a season of that with my parents, and my dad was married before he married my mom, and so it's one of those weird things where you're like, I didn't have all the right variables in the equation, and even still, I still feel pretty young in the faith, so I'm always looking for opportunities to just be better. If we're gonna, I wanted to just say thank you to everyone who's on this call and all the sage advice and wisdom and honesty you guys have shared. It's definitely inspirational, if anything, to know that it can be done, and that not only just in having good kids raised, but just as a man, like as a godly man, it actually can happen with you guys that I'm speaking with. So it's pretty encouraging. So thank you all for that example.
Well, thank you, Anthony. You're a lot closer than you think, and you give yourself credit for it. And give yourself grace and room to fail, because you don't do things right all the time. I heard an old saying where when your kids are little, you are their hero. You're like Superman to them. That you're larger than life, and then they grow up and see you as you really are, and hopefully they forgive you.
Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
Man, yeah. Thank you so much, you guys, for sharing tonight. We want this just to continue to be, there will continue to be resources for us as dads. And so I reached out to Rich Feger, and we joked about how he couldn't be here tonight. He let me know because he's on a date night with his wife for the first time in 3 months. So yeah, like good example. And he's doing that. But Rich did want me to let everyone know that there is just a track at church that they really want to help dads and parents in general, just with their kids. So, one element of that is designing kids programs so we can drop our kids off at where they'll learn to thrive in Christ. But another element of that is just empowering parents specifically in their own homes to know what are great ways to do that and how God can empower us in those. So Rich at neighborhoodchurch.com gave me permission. I can plug his email, and he'd love to continue to be a resource. He's got some cool parenting resources up his sleeve. So feel free to hit Rich up, any of us, for any resources. I did get a request from one of our guys who said he wanted to come tonight, and he asked if we could record this and share it with him later. So is everyone okay if I do that? If I share a recording of this? If you're like, if that feels weird to you or something, you can always email me or text me later and be like, hey, I'd rather not, but that's okay. So just want to double check with that.
Just edit out the part where I picked my nose, would you?
Yeah. I'll turn on like the beauty filter too, that like takes 10 years off of all of us.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You put halos on each of
Especially us old guys.
Yeah.
Turn this brown again.
Yeah.
Nice. So yeah, we'll try to share this as a resource too. Thanks again, you guys, for coming. We'll hopefully be able to do another event like this with our men's ministry coming up here, and hopefully things open up and we can start doing things in person too. So that'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Carrie, for rounding us all up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.